Should The Acolyte get a second season? Season 1 of this Acolyte series has officially come to an end. And although that finale definitely set up more stories to be told, the Star Wars fandom is at a civil war trying to figure out if this Acolyte show should or should not get a season 2.
This is where the fun begins.
Now, before we get into whether it should or should not, currently Lucasfilm or Disney have not greenlit a second season for this Acolyte series. So right now, season 2 is not on the way. However, with San Diego Comic-Con being this week and D23 happening in early August, Disney could be announcing a second season to this series any day now. But that's not what this video is about. We're not talking about whether it will get a second season or not. We're talking about whether it should or should not. So first, let's start with why this Acolyte show should not get a second season. Now, you gotta start with the biggest reason, and that is the reason I have to make this video in the first place. The Star Wars fandom is completely divided when it comes to this Acolyte series. Some fans really loved this show, see it as one of their favorite pieces of Star Wars content ever, and some people hated it week in and week out, and took time out of their day to voice their opinions about how much they really hated this show. Now, personally, I really enjoyed the show, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Star Wars fans can have their opinions. They can love something, they can hate something, and that's perfectly fine. The problem, however, with this first season of The Acolyte was just people attacking each other. Whether you like this show or not, the fighting was going both ways. And that is a huge problem that needs to be fixed. And if there is a second season, there is no doubt that that fighting is going to continue. But that brings me to my second point, which is one of the biggest arguments that was had throughout season 1 of this Acolyte series, the possibility of a retcon of the prequel trilogy. Going into the first season of The Acolyte, many fans were concerned because this show is focusing on the Sith in a time period where the Sith are not supposed to be around. In the Phantom Menace, Ki-Adi-Mundi says that the Sith haven't been around for a millennia, and a millennia is 1,000 years. This Acolyte show takes place only 100 years before that, meaning the Sith cannot be around, or at least from the point of view of the Jedi, they cannot be around. And now that season 1 has come and gone and we made it out safely, seeing that every Jedi who came face to face with Qimir, the Sith Lord in the Acolyte season 1, is now dead, there's no way for the Jedi to know that the Sith have returned, even though us as the audience saw Darth Plagueis. But just because season 1 worked out well and they didn't retcon the prequel trilogy, if you add a second season to this series, you're risking a retcon even more. Now, one of the biggest reasons that fans say this Acolyte shouldn't get a second season is the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Currently, the audience score sits at a 17%, which is horrible.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Now, the last reason as to why this Acolyte shouldn't get a second season is because all the characters are dead. Now, obviously, not all of the characters are dead, but a lot of your main characters from this first season, like Master Sol, Yord, Jeki, Indara, Torben, Kelnaka, they're all dead. And although they introduced this brand new cast of Jedi in a very cool way, you grew attachments to characters like Jeki, Yord, Sol, they're all gone now.
They're dead. Every single one of them.
So moving into a second season, the only characters that we really have any sort of connection and love for are Qimir, Osha, and Venestra. You could argue that Venestra Rho is a side character in this first season. So it would be a difficult task to continue this story into a second season when you've already killed off a lot of fan favorite characters. But now, with all that being said, let's talk about why the Acolyte should get a second season. Well, like I said at the top of the video, they set up a second season, with the revelation in the finale that Venestra Rho is most likely the former master to Qimir, and she thought that he was dead this entire time, and seeing Venestra Rho go to Yoda to ask for help with this entire situation, making it so Yoda would be a more integral role into season 2 of this Acolyte, not to mention Darth Plagueis. Darth Plagueis was the former master to Palpatine. And since his first mention in Star Wars canon in Revenge of the Sith when Palpatine said this,
"Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?"
he hasn't been heard from or seen in Star Wars canon since then. Well, that was, of course, until this Acolyte finale. And now that we've seen him for the first time in live action, we want more.
I want more. And I know I shouldn't.
And a second season of The Acolyte would hopefully give us a lot more of Darth Plagueis, maybe training with Osha and Qimir, or maybe even keeping the Sith a secret from the Jedi by having to kill Jedi. Another reason this Acolyte should get a second season is because of Qimir. To me, Qimir is one of the coolest new characters in Star Wars. He might even be one of the coolest characters in Star Wars, period. And getting to see more of his backstory and future story filled in with the second season is definitely worth it. Now, with that being said, there are clearly arguments as to why there should and shouldn't be a second season of this Acolyte show. And although I think there actually should be a second season for all the reasons I just mentioned, there is a big problem in the Star Wars fandom right now that needs to be addressed. It has to do with the 17% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. The Star Wars fandom is in a very difficult place. There are a lot of Star Wars fans who feel very hurt or betrayed by all the decisions that were made about their favorite characters. And now those fans don't want anything to do with anything that's new in Star Wars. And that leads to a lot of controversy online. And it also leads to a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score. Let's be real. That's not real. The audience score for The Acolyte was a 13% before the first 2 episodes even premiered. So before the fans had even seen a single second of this Acolyte show, it already had a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. This just proves that there's a portion of the Star Wars fandom that isn't even going to give any new project a chance. They're not even going to watch it and give their own opinion. It could be the greatest thing to ever exist, and it would still already have a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes before it was even released. Now, this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed. And honestly, I don't know how. I don't know how you fix this portion of the fandom that's just not going to like anything that you release before it even comes out. And this, in Star Wars, is not something new by any means. This happened with The Acolyte. This happened with Ahsoka last year. This happened with Andor. This happened with Kenobi. This happened with The Mandalorian. And if you want to go back even further, it happened with the prequel trilogy. So I really don't know if there is a fix to this problem. I think there will always be a small portion of the fandom that will be screaming louder than everybody else about how much they hate every new project. And with that being said, let's come to reality for a second. There most likely will be a second season to this Acolyte show, and that's fantastic. I liked the first season, and so did a lot of you. But even if you didn't, this civil war needs to stop. You can have your own opinions when it comes to Star Wars. That's perfectly fine. Nobody is telling you not to. But as soon as you start attacking somebody else for not liking something or liking something, that's the issue. And it's a big problem, and it needs to stop. Look, my favorite Star Wars show is Ahsoka because I love Rebels, I love the Clone Wars. It's just a whole thing. I love Ahsoka. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you to make your favorite show Ahsoka, the same way that my least favorite Star Wars movie is The Last Jedi. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you if your favorite movie is The Last Jedi that you're wrong and you're stupid, because that's my opinion. And yours is probably going to be different. And isn't that okay? Yes, the correct answer is yes to that question. But with all of that being said, do you think that The Acolyte should get a second season or not? And please, keep it civil in the comments section below. And I know the finale of that Acolyte show was pretty confusing, but that's okay because I explain everything that happens in the end of this show in this video right here.